favorite of so many of you. It's an honor to be sitting with, once again, Professor Mordechai Kedar, one of the world's leading experts on Arabic culture and on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Let me remind you a little bit about Mordechai Kedar. Dr. Mordechai Kedar is a professor of Arabic literature at Bar-Ilan University in Israel. For 25 years, Mordechai served in military intelligence for the IDF, specializing in Islamic groups and the politics of Arab countries and the Arab media. And Mordechai Kedar lectures throughout the world on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He is in America now, lecturing. And Mordechai Kedar, how wonderful it is to have you. And you have been able to bring an understanding and insight into a very complicated problem, which gets very little real, sophisticated attention in the United States and in the media. And so it's wonderful when our audience gets to see you, and it's especially wonderful when I get to sit with you again.
Thank you very much, Mark.
So Mordechai, as we're sitting together now, how do you view the Israeli-Palestinian conflict today? And you heard some of the questions I raised. You know, who's it for? Why has there been, Mordechai, no resolution?
Well, this conflict didn't start yesterday or a year ago or even 10 years ago, and I would even say not even 100 years ago. What we witness today is only another link in a very, very long chain of hostilities by which Islam treated Judaism and Jews. The origin or the roots of the Islamic hatred to Judaism are already at the year of 610 CE, more than 14 centuries ago. At that time, when Muhammad bin Abdullah, later the prophet of Islam, started to bring to his tribesmen, the Quraysh tribe in Mecca, all kinds of stories about Adam and Eve and how a sheik was created, and Noah and the ark, and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, who was sold by his brothers, and Pharaoh and the lady in Egypt, and the Israelites, and all these stories about Jesus and Johannes as well. His tribe's people blamed him that the whole Islam, which he brings them, including the ideas of Yom Hadin, means the day of judgment, and the paradise, and Gehenom, hell, are all copied from Judaism and Christianity. As it's stated in the Koran, Asatir al-Awwalin. They blamed him for recycling the stories of the first ones. Asatir al-Awwalin. Means Islam was obsessed from the beginning about Judaism. And this is why they developed through the years the idea that Islam is Din al-Haq, means religion of truth, while Judaism and Christianity are Din al-Batil, means the religion of falsehood.
Is this taught formally in Muslim mosques?
Taught in schools, preached in mosques, recycled in the media. Wherever you go, you hear it. The Judaism is Din al-Batil, the religion of falsehood.
Forgive me, I want to press you for one moment. Are you talking about what is being taught today in the Muslim world, even in American Muslim institutions?
American institutions, Islamic institutions, are no different from the mainstream Islamic institutions all over the world, because they use the same Koran, the same Hadith, oral tradition, the same Sirah, means the same biography of Muhammad, the same books of halakha, of Sharia, the same everything. So there's no different Islam in America compared to Islam in other countries.
You hear all the time, Mordechai, the difference between Islamic extremists and Islamic moderates. What is the difference?
Well, there is no extreme Islam and moderate Islam. There is one Islam. Because if we assume that there is radical Islam versus moderate Islam, you have to assume that there is radical Quran versus another Quran which is moderate. There is no such a thing. The same Quran.
Okay, is the Quran basically a radical, violent book that preaches some kind of hatred against Jews?
Yes, and not only. Means, in the Quran there is everything. There is a verse which says, La ikraha fid din, means no compulsion in religion. Very good, very nice, very moderate idea. While if you turn the page, you learn how the Jews are those who the worst enemies of Allah. The wrath of Allah rests upon them because they didn't embrace Islam and
Are
so forth.
Jews literally defined?
Yeah.
It's not simply
Ahl
non-believers.
Ahl al-Kitab, the
It's about Jews.
people of the book, means Jews and Christians. And they are, Allah turned them into apes and swines. Already in the Quran. Okay, so the Quran has everything. The same the Hadith, the old tradition. Everything is there, from most moderate ideas all the way to the most radical ideas. And even the Sirah of Muhammad, the biography of Muhammad, has all kinds of incidents from his life when he was very nice to Jews on one side, but on the other side, he slaughtered them. So now the problem is that, what we see today as different Muslims. Let's say a Muslim who grows up in a very moderate environment and internalizes the values of being moderate, most probably when he shapes his ideas and tailors his Islamic garment, he will use the raw material which fits his culture. The La ikraha fi din, no compulsion in religion from the Quran, and the moderate ideas from the Hadith and the Sirah of Muhammad and so forth. While another Muslim who grew up in a very, let's say in Libya, where people are killing each other all day long, most probably when he has to shape his ideas, he will pick from the Quran and from the Hadith and from the Sirah all those verses and ideas which fit his culture. So what we have is not radical Islam versus moderate Islam. We have radical Muslims versus moderate Muslims, either individuals or groups, because when they group, you get Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State or Hamas or Hezbollah, who are groupings of people who share the same ideas about Islam, the radical ideas. On the other side, there are many moderate Muslims, like Muslims facing tomorrow in Toronto, Canada, or a place like this, who actually base their views on the most moderate ideas, verses, which they find in the same sources. So this is the situation. What we have today is one Islam, but different Muslims.
Okay. I understand, and you understand from me, the reason why this would be important for our audience to hear you speak about is that we are being told that the ISIS extremism that is trying to impose a caliphate and Sharia law and is willing to behead enemies, slaughter enemies, drown them alive,
Selling the daughters.
selling them into slavery, yes, that this is a bastardization of Islam, that this is not authentic Islam, and that authentic Islam is peaceful, is a religion of peace, and that is why, for example, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, refuses to refer to ISIS with Islamic nomenclature, because what he argues is, just as there are extreme crazies in every religious group, as they do not represent the mainstream of their own religion, we should not associate the ideology that propels the ISIS extremists and identify that with any authentic Islam. You say.
Well, it's totally detached from reality or from the history, because the Islamic State, rather than ISIS, it's not anymore, the second IS is omitted It's not only in Iraq and Syria, it's only IS, Islamic State, as they call themselves. The Islamic State bases its ideas and ways of conduct on the early sources of Islam. What they do is actually emulate the first century of Islam, when they were beheading people, burning people, selling daughters of infidels for slavery, and breaking and destroying remnants of other religions which are viewed as infidel religions. So they are actually walking exactly on the footsteps of the 7th century Islam. Later, Islam became more moderate because of various reasons. So they view what later came into Islam as some kind of deviation of Islam. They go to the origin, to the fundamental ideas and ways of conduct of the early Islam, how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, behaved, and his immediate followers. And this is why they call themselves caliphate, just like those caliphs which replaced Muhammad right after his death. And so forth. So they claim, and they base what they do on the sources of Islam. So coming to say that they are detached from Islam or deviation of Islam, it's not correct. This is what they read in their own holy books. But it's very dangerous to say that they hijacked Islam, because they can say as well that the others, the moderate, hijacked Islam. Because once you take this weapon on one side, that though they hijacked Islam, you actually legitimize what they say, that the moderates hijacked Islam. So this is what happens inside Islam. It's a clash inside Islam, which, look, most casualties, the victims, are 98% of the victims of the radicalism in Islam are Muslims before others. Okay, so this has to be...
And what's the ideology there? What permits them to kill other Muslims?
Because this is what Allah told them to do.
To do
as they
to
believe.
whom? To whom?
To whoever does not agree with them, whether he is a Muslim or not. First of all, the Shia. Since the Shia are real deviation of Islam, they went out of Islam. By the way, the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia think the same thing about the Shia. They think that they are some kind of people who went out from Islam. So they deserve any punishment which will be inflicted upon them by the Islamic State. Then come the others, the infidels, the Jews, the Christians, the Buddhists, and the Yazidis, whose daughters are being sold and the men are being slaughtered. The Alawis in Syria. Look, the Alawis in Syria who are in power. Assad, today, his father, and also Salah Jadid, who was then before Assad, since 1966, they are all Alawis. And the Alawis are struggling not only to stay in power, they are struggling in order to keep their heads connected to their shoulders, because they are viewed as infidels by Muslims, because their religion is not Islamic religion, in spite of what they say. But if you really dig into the religion, you see that this is something which is totally not Islam.
It sounds as if you are somewhat critical of our president for refusing to call ISIS or IS, as you point out, Islamic. Is he making a mistake?
Look,
politically,
anyone who tries to stick his head into the sand, not to see the reality, not to name a spade, whether he's a president or a journalist, makes the same mistake. Because this is what we say, this is what we see. And we cannot say, we cannot shut our eyes and say, hey, this doesn't exist. And this, like children, you don't see me as they, okay? So this is, they shut their eyes in order not to see what happens, and they think that nothing happens, or it's not correct. It's unreal.
Okay. When you began talking about the enmity, you didn't talk about Arabs and Jews. You spoke about Muslims and Jews.
Right.
Does this reflect a reality that there is a major split within the Arab world between Christian Arabs and Muslim Arabs as it applies to the existence of the State of Israel?
Well, depends whom you ask. Definitely you can see Christian Arabs taking part in the war against Israel through the history of the last 60, 70 years. But it is caused mainly by the fact that Christians want to be viewed as real Arabs, because Muslims view them as some kind of strange Arabs because they are not Muslims. So they try to be holier than the Pope by the war against Israel and so forth. But look, Palestinians are Muslims, and there are Arabs as well. And
Aren't there Christian Palestinians as well?
yes, but they are forced to join the war against Israel. Otherwise, they will be targeted, as the Christians of Bethlehem, for example, were targeted, so they ran away. Bethlehem today is almost empty of Christians.
Okay, and forgive me, in terms of Israeli citizens who are Arabs, are the Arab Israelis mostly Christian or mostly Muslim?
Muslims.
Really?
80% of them are Muslims. And the rest are Christians, Druze, Alawis, Baha'is, and Ahmadis. Means we have in what we call the Arab sector, we have at least 6 religions.
Do they intermarry?
No, and not in most cases.
In most cases, these are separate communities.
Separate, not only this, there are Christian villages in the Galilee where the people do not allow Muslims to live in their villages. The Christians, the Arab Christians, reject Muslims who want to live in their villages. Why? Because there are much behind the scenes which people don't know about.
We know nothing, Mordechai. We know nothing.
Look, there is a little problem which we should mention here. Here in the United States of America, religion is something which should not play a role, at least not a major role, in politics. In the Middle East, your religion is the most important characteristic which defines you. If you're a Muslim, you're legitimate. If you're not, go away, vanish, especially if you're a Jew. Secondly, even within Islam, you have sects, the Sunnah and the Shia. The Sunnah and the Shia are fighting each other for 14 centuries on the succession of Muhammad. And this struggle between the Sunnah and the Shia started when Muhammad closed his eyes forever in the year of 632 CE. And they kill each other en masse until this very day, almost 14 centuries. And both are Muslims. Means Shia and Sunnah are Muslims. So can you understand it? As an American, the Muslims are killing Muslims on a question which was 14 centuries ago? Okay, nobody can get it. People here in America keep asking me, what's wrong with these people? Because they don't get it. That something in the Middle East culture is totally different from America. Mm-hmm. You know what? Let me give you an example. What it means, the Sunnah and the Shia. You might remember what happened in the elections of 2000 between Al Gore and George W. Bush. America was divided half and half, and Florida was the tipping point, and there's some problems. So they went to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court decided that George W. Bush won Florida, and America had a president for 4 years, and then another 4 years, and nobody challenged the legitimacy of George W. Bush because of what happened in these elections. Imagine that the American nation is divided to 2 parts. One part supports George W. Bush, and the other part, and a half, supports Al Gore. And those 2 parts are fighting each other an all-out war for 14 centuries. This is exactly the Sunni-Shi'i rift.
Amazing. By the way, there's an obvious implication of what you're saying. If Muslims are fighting Muslims because of a difference of religion within the Muslim world, it should surprise no one that Muslims are fighting Jews in the Middle East. And it seems to me that the overarching reality, which most Americans never hear, which the American administration seems either not to understand for some unfathomable reason or doesn't want to talk about, is that within the Muslim world, there is a mentality that says we can never make peace with the infidel, with the Jew, and with the state of Israel. It's not about borders. It's not about Jerusalem. It's not about whether we do or do not have an army. It's not about air rights. It's not about water rights. It's about the fact that there should be no Jew living on Arab land, on Muslim land. I want to know the extent to which what I've just said is something you teach, or am I wrong in some way?
It has to be modified a little bit. First of all, Muslims can give peace to infidels, but only temporary peace, only as long as the infidels are too powerful to be defeated. So the Muslims can give them temporary peace, based on a precedent which Prophet Muhammad made peace, temporary peace, with the infidels of Mecca in the year of 628 CE, known as a Hudaybiyah peace. That peace was signed for almost 10 years. After 2 years, when the Meccans fell asleep on God, he attacked them in the year of 630. Means 2 years into the agreement of 10 years. And he violated the whole thing. Now, Muslims learn from this precedent two things. The first thing is that when you, as a Muslim, cannot defeat the infidel, you can give him a peace for a while, just like what Muhammad did, since he was a role model for a Muslim, he was ma'asum. Second thing is, when Allah, with His mercy, gives you the opportunity and the ability to get rid of the infidel, you do it, even within the time of the temporary peace. Why? This is how the Prophet Muhammad did in Mecca. So, yes, we have temporary peace with Egypt. The peace which we signed with Egypt in 1979 in the Blair House was justified by the Al-Azhar, means the supreme Islamic institution in Cairo, as some kind of Hudaybiyah peace. Since we failed in 1948, we failed in 56, we failed in 67, even the surprise of 73 did not help us. So Israel is invincible. We need the money from the Europeans. Let's give them a Hudaybiyah peace. That's what the sages of Al-Azhar allowed.
Fascinating. Is that true of Jordan as well?
I didn't find the Hudaybiyah peace mentioned in Jordan, but
it was mentioned in Egypt?
Yes, explicitly in a verdict, fatwa, which the Al-Azhar gave Sadat when he needed this hechsher for the peace with Israel. The second time which we heard about Hudaybiyah peace was from Arafat. When he signed with us the Oslo agreements in 1993, he justified it as another version of Hudaybiyah peace. So definitely they can give us a temporary peace only as long as we are invincible. And you know what? I'll buy it. But I'll make sure that Israel is invincible forever. So the temporary peace will be forever.
By the way, there is a very important consequence to what you're saying. It is crucial, not only for Israel to remain strong, but for the United States to do everything it can, if the United States really wants to see peace in the Middle East, to make Israel as strong as it can be and to indicate to the Palestinians that America is with Israel and that the Palestinians have no choice, as you have described, but to give a Hudaybiyah peace to Israel. The only way we would ever have a peace agreement, Mordechai, would be if the entire Western world were behind Israel in an unquestionable way. Is that correct?
Definitely. Because when you say that you want peace, that you seek peace, especially peace now, you are viewed in the Middle East as somebody who lost the war and now begging for his life. And in the Middle East, in the good case, you get a kick out, and in the bad case, you will be slaughtered because you lost the battle. So if we really want to have peace in the Middle East, Israel should be viewed as a bastion which cannot be defeated politically, economically, and of course militarily. And by the way, those who call to BDS Israel are actually stabbing us in the back. Because when our enemies see that we are boycotted, sanctioned, and divested, so they are encouraged to continue the war and to have the flames higher against us. Mm-hmm. So this actually works against peace. Mm-hmm. And this is the problem which here in America and in European countries as well, people don't get it.
Okay, and why is that? I ask this all the time. What you're saying, it's not like you're the only voice saying this. And there are other scholars who basically have the same perspective and offer the same perspective. How could it be that a sophisticated country like America, that the American administration doesn't understand what is such a simple reality?
Look, if I try to look at the successes of the American administrations on both sides of the aisle, in the Middle East, you can find it very little success.
Very little success.
Very little. Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia. Egypt. Where can you find any real success of America? Because Americans think like Americans, and they don't understand that the Middle East works according to totally different rules, which very few people here in this country understand.
And there's nobody in the American administration who is an Arabist who can say to the administration, you've got it wrong? There's nobody who can do that?
Well, I know personally somebody who used to work for the Pentagon and wrote very, very good papers, but he resigned like 5 years ago when he understood that nobody reads his papers. Mm-hmm. So...
Okay, there is another philosophy, and you spoke about this once before with me. I want you to do it again. The ethic that Americans are brought up with, and American Jews, all people are basically the same. We all have the same dreams and goals for ourselves and for our children. Everybody should live in peace and in safety. No child should be at risk. And we should have as much material comfort as is possible. And parents love their children, whether they're American, Israeli, Muslim, European. And therefore, what we are encouraged to do is treat the other, whomever the other is, as the Jewish tradition, as Leviticus says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Your re'acha kamocha. Okay. To what extent is that the truth? Are people basically just people wherever they live on the planet Earth?
This is as far as could be from the reality. Values are different. Mindsets are different. The toolbox which every culture uses are totally different. Look, when it comes to life, what is life? In Western culture, where laïcité means the secularism is the name of the game, life is what you have in this world. In religions, many religions view life only as a corridor which leads you to the real life in the afterlife, means in paradise. And life here is temporary, while life in paradise is eternal, and so forth. So religions, Judaism, Islam, and others could be as well, view life as something which is very cheap merchandise, temporary, miserable. You can get rid of it, because what is important is what comes later. So this is a very big difference, because the Western, I would say, secular, atheistic cultures do not see any afterlife. This is why people burn themselves. Who cares about what happens later? So definitely the view to life, which is the most important thing which a human being is being given, is totally different between cultures. Then quality of life, misery. In some cultures, listen, you should refrain from misery because you want to live happy life, health, wealth, education. Good. In other religions, there are if you torture yourself, if you are a martyr, it's the best thing which can happen to you because all your sins will be cleansed and you will go. Okay, so even the quality of life, how life is viewed differently in different cultures. And you cannot evaluate one culture by using the ruler or the points of view from another culture. It's just like to try to assess the problems of your teeth by going to somebody who will deal with your feet. They think in a different way. Okay, this different culture.
Okay. You know, there's a very famous line attributed to Golda Meir. There will be peace when Arab mothers love their children more than they hate us. Do Palestinian mothers love their children the way Jewish mothers love their children?
Yes, and because they love their children, they wish them to have good life in heaven with 72 virgins. And in some cases, the family encourages the boy or the girl to go to perform a suicide attack on Israelis and Jews. Why? Because this will be a zaffa, means a wedding in heaven with the 72 virgins. Okay, so they love, but the consequences of this love are totally different. While we Israelis love our children, we want to see them growing and flourishing in this life. In some cases, in the other side, the Islamic side of the equation, you see the love being translated into desire to see them being martyrs and go to heaven.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you said on a prior discussion with me that many people have asked me about was your reference to classical Arabic, which you said does not have the word compromise. Speak about that for a moment.
Well, look, always a language reflects the culture. Look how many words we have for a car. 100 years ago, you didn't have so many words for a car. Okay, so compromise, since there's only a modern word in Arabic, hal wasat means a solution of the middle, or a middle solution, something like this. This is a modern word. There is no classical word for compromise because they never compromised. Struggles came to their end when one of the sides ceased to exist. So why compromise? This is from the practical point of view. And from the religious point of view, Allah doesn't come to compromise with anyone because Allah demands. Allah is absolute. Allah doesn't have to negotiate. Allah commands you, and that's it. So why should there be in Allah's language, which is the Arabic, anything which reflects something which doesn't exist? So this is why there is no compromise in classical Arabic. Modern language took it from other languages.
Is it relevant to you that classical Arabic didn't have the word compromise, if in fact modern Arabic does?
Again, compromise is something which can be accepted not willingly, but only if it's imposed. Mm-hmm. Because Israel is invincible. So you can call it a compromise. But it
doesn't mean the same as what a Westerner means.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
We have also heard for years that part of the problem is Israel has become the Goliath. It once was the David, but vis-a-vis Palestinians, it is now the Goliath, and it engages in actions that represent a disproportionate use of force, as both an Israeli and as a scholar. What's your response to the charge that when it comes to Israel's military response to Palestinians, Israel uses disproportionate, meaning inappropriate, if not illegal, force?
Well, I would ask the same question as many Arabs asked those days. Who is responsible for the death toll in Gaza, whether it's Israel only or Hamas also? And many of Arabs already said that Hamas is responsible for the death in Gaza. First of all, they saw from the day one, and this conflict in 2014 lasted over 50 days, 50 days. As of day one, they saw that the power or the balance of power between Israel and Hamas is disproportionate. So they should have stopped it in this after the one day. Means the fact that they continued to launch missiles on Israel means that they are responsible for the death toll in Gaza, no less than the Israelis. This is one thing.
More than the Israelis.
Definitely. Second thing, they know how dense the population in Gaza is. Why did they launch missiles from houses, populated houses and neighborhoods? They know exactly what will happen. No state in the world will tolerate it. So why should Israel suffer 8,000 as we suffered through the last years from Gaza? Okay? People, unfortunately, look at Israel with double standard. They expect from Israel to act like Maria Theresa in an area of El Capones, and it doesn't work. The Middle East, where life worth almost nothing. In the Arab world, look what happens in Libya, Iraq, Syria. What do they expect, that Israel can survive by wishy-washy behavior with gloves? You know, it cannot. The environment is so violent, is so vicious, where, you know, dead people worth more because you bring all the cameras from the whole world to see what Israel is doing. So for Hamas, a dead boy worth much more than a boy who is alive. Look, how much since the war, cement was given to the Palestinians in order to reconstruct Gaza. Most of it went to the tunnels. Only recently, Israel found another tunnel which they dug into Israel. Would America tolerate such a thing from any terror group which lives on the borders of America, that it infiltrates in America with tunnels? What do you mean? So, and the whole world keeps maintaining pressure on us. Give them cement, give them iron, so they can reconstruct Gaza. But nobody goes to Hamas to find out what they do with the cement and the concrete. Okay,
isn't that so frustrating to you as an Israeli? I mean, aren't the Israeli people just, you feel like you're living in Alice in Wonderland, the way the world, it's worse than a double standard. It asks Israel to do something that is virtually inhuman and counter to the instinct to survive, which, as you say, in America, Americans would not tolerate it for a second. Sure. And we would use as much force as is necessary to stop it from happening, and any nation would use as much force as necessary.
Look, disproportionate. September 11 brought the destruction of Afghanistan entirely. Was this proportionate? Mm-hmm. Okay, so, you know, when people blame us, sometimes I tell them, go look at the mirror before you blame us. How many demonstrations are here in the streets of the United States of America and in Europe because of what happens in Syria, Libya, Yemen, Iraq? You don't see it. But if Israel does something in Gaza, all of a sudden all the streets are full with all demonstrations against Israel.
Why is that?
First of all, double standard.
What drives that?
I think that behind the scenes there is some kind of anti-Semitism, mm-hmm. which is in the background, mm-hmm. and the influence of Arab money, which comes to all kinds of organizations, here in the States and Europe as well, and the modern approach to the poor one as the underdog, and this actually what makes Israel into Goliath
You just mentioned refugees a moment ago. You know, in America, there's a huge debate about whether America should open its doors to Syrian refugees. And the argument against it is that ISIS will use Syrian refugees as a cover to infiltrate the United States, that there will be ISIS and al-Qaeda operatives coming in as if they were Syrian refugees. And therefore, there are many people who are calling for the United States to be very careful, to limit, or even to exclude Syrian refugees. What would you say to Americans on this issue?
Well, women in most cases are innocent women, children are children. The problem is with males between, I would say, 16, 17 and above. Definitely you need information, and there are ways how to gain information, not completely about people, but after they came in, if they come in, they have to be under very, very big magnifier to watch every step.
How?
Intelligence. And America has the means to do it. These people, since they are potentially invaded by the Islamic State, definitely you should. You know, there is always the question about M&Ms. If somebody gives you a bag of M&Ms, 200 M&Ms, and tells you that only one is poisoned, how many will you eat?
None.
Okay? So the same thing is this. If you get in here 10,000 people.
Is it the same?
If you bring in America or Canada 10,000 people, and somebody tells you that few of them, handful of them, are terrorists, how many would you bring in?
There are those who would argue that living in a democracy puts the onus on you to live with the burden of that kind of problem, that you are not going to exclude 995 out of 1,000 because there may be 5 bad apples. That part of being in a democracy and the values of the democracy require you to take that risk.
Democracy should not be a way of suicide for the community. Democracy has to know how to defend itself. And if a democracy is not in defense, it is on a suicide course. I'll give you a good example. In Europe, people who go to fight in the jihad fields in Syria and Iraq are allowed to come back to Europe, to European countries, although they might be terrorists, as we saw in Paris in November. Israel, on the contrary, whenever we know in Israel that somebody went to the Islamic State to fight, and we have like some dozens of them, he is not a citizen anymore, and he cannot come back to the country. Only if he proves that he spent the last 3 years in Australia or in Nevada. Otherwise, he cannot come back to Israel, and Israel actually recommends that he find a better place for him in some Islamic jihadist environment, which will be much more comfortable for him. Because Israel defends itself as a democracy. I'm not sure that somebody who believes in the Islamic State values should be allowed to come back to a country where he doesn't share anything with the population. What, do they believe in democracy? Why should democracy protect them?
The answer is that democracy does not define itself by the fascism or totalitarianism of a non-democratic state. That ultimately you don't want to use that as the yardstick or as the value system.
Look, even here in America, there are laws which prevent Nazi fighters from being Americans. You can, if you find that there are Nazi fighters, Nazi criminals, you can send them back. So the same thing is this. Since the American democracy cannot tolerate Nazism, so America knows how to kick out.
Okay. By the way, I want to throw the question back at you in a different way. One of the things that is always, I mean, in some ways I admire it. In another way, it just confuses the heck out of me. That Israel tolerates a certain kind of seditious language and behavior among Arab Israelis. So that Israel tolerates the commemoration of the Nakba, which is the Arab statement that the existence of the State of Israel is a catastrophe. And the State of Israel permits an Arab party in the Knesset to remain in the Knesset even when members of that party in the Knesset preach the destruction of the State of Israel. That's seditious talk, if not seditious language. Israel permits it, and it permits it based on the same kind of logic that as a democracy and as a pluralistic experiment where Jews want, if possible, to bring in the peaceful Arab who should be an Israeli citizen, as a Christian should be an Israeli citizen, as the Jew will be the Israeli citizen, that somehow Israel is making a very important statement about its idealism, which at the same time makes me question the same kind of way you have questioned the whole idea of why would a democracy put itself at risk. As an Israeli, what do you answer?
Well, Israel shifted through the years in this issue because in the 60s, 50 years ago, there was an attempt to put into the Knesset a party which preaches to turn Israel into a state which will not be Jewish, will not be Zionist, a state which belongs to everybody. And it was not allowed to run to the Knesset in the 60s. In the 90s, the Supreme Judge Aaron Barak changed it, and he said something very strange. Since they anyway cannot implement this ideology, let them run to the Knesset. But what happens in Israel, but by the allowing of those people to sit in the Knesset and to preach and to say against the country as much as they want, to curse the country as well, this is some kind of let out steam. Definitely they have all kinds of problems with the state. Let them let out steam. Because the more they say, the less they do. And Israel prefers to hear very problematic speech while takes very good care that they don't do anything. So on one side, they can say whatever they like as a real democracy, which allows the freedom of speech. While on the other side, the state watches very well what they do, and once they glitch, they are being caught.
One more issue. There are those who take a somewhat different tact, different line of argument, and who do feel that the State of Israel has implemented policies which prevent the Palestinian from feeling that Israel is serious about a peace agreement. This is separate from our discussion of Israel has to be absolutely strong for the Palestinian ever to want to enter into the Hudaybiyah of peace. But there are those who say, for example, Israel's settlement policy is a signal to the Palestinian world that the Israeli has no intention of making a peaceful resolution in a two-state solution or a solution that you suggested last time you were here with many Palestinian states on the West Bank,
Emirates.
And that Israeli settlement policy is a major obstacle to any peace process. Mordechai, what do you say?
Well, this is only a fig leaf to the unwillingness of some to make peace with Israel to begin with. For example, many of them, view Tel Aviv as a settlement. So what should we do? Take Tel Aviv out?
Yes, although nobody who argues this argues that Tel Aviv or
No,
Haifa,
in Arabic.
Nobody in America, whether they're in the Jewish world or the non-Jewish world, argues that Tel Aviv and Haifa should be sacrificed because they are settlements.
Look,
They're only talking about what happens on the West Bank.
Look, this is the problem, because they think that that's what the Palestinians say.
Exactly.
Look, the majority of the seats of the Palestinian Legislative Council is taken by Hamas since 2006. Hamas charter views Tel Aviv as illegal, illegitimate, immoral settlement, just like any outpost. And they are the majority of the Legislative Council in the Palestinian authorities institutions. So, okay, So this is what makes the difference. And this is why, look, Israel took out 8,000 people from Gaza Strip, the Gush Katif. Israel proved, and 4 of them in the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria rather. Israel proved that when there is a reason, we can move settlements from place to place. If there is a peace, if there is an agreement, if there is a reason, test us. But they wouldn't, because they don't want the whole thing. They look in the Palestinian media. Jaffa is occupied territory. So is Haifa, not to mention Jerusalem. Everything is Palestine. So what are we talking about? Ariel?
Yes. Your point is that to the Palestinian, there is no difference to them
Not at all.
whether a piece of land is on one side of the Green Line or the other. It's all illegal, and they want it all.
Look, the Green Line has nothing to do with the Palestinians. This was a ceasefire.
Of course.
The ceasefire line between Israel and Jordan. Now, since there is an international border with Jordan in the Jordan River, the Green Line lost its significance. Now people try to turn the wheels of history back and to talk again about the Green Line, which is today is meaningless. So this is one thing. Second thing, even if we establish a Palestinian state more or less on the Green Line, in my view, it will turn into another Hamastan in no time, either by elections, as already happened in 2006, or by coup d'etat, as already happened in Gaza in June 2007, when Hamas took Gaza over by force. So what will happen when Hamas takes the Palestinian state, the forthcoming Palestinians over? Will the American army come to chase them out? Or the French army? Or all those who preach to us day and night, give them a state? What will they do that when this state will become another Hamastan? Oops, they will say, and we didn't predict. And I know that they don't think to that stage, but we live in the Middle East. We know what happens. We know the processes. Look, there are people who preach to us, give up on the Golan, strengthen Assad, give him more power by having the Golan. Will this justify, will this legitimize him in the eyes of the jihadists, being an Alawite, infidel? Forget it. This is the Middle East, where religion is the most important component of the characteristics of a human being. So the Golan, with the Golan and without the Golan, if we give them the Golan, the Iranians will shoot Tiberias directly, or the other jihadists who are in Syria. Anyone has any guarantee against it? And this is the problem. The people do not think twice about what they say about Israel and what Israel should do to the Arabs. Israel knows, and we in Israel know much better than the others. And unfortunately, there are some Israelis who still live in dreams of new Middle East, just like what Peres tried to convince the whole world that there is new Middle East. Definitely, if you see today the Middle East, very, very old Middle East. And this is why he stopped printing his book again and again.
Yasha Koach, you do fabulous work.
Thank you.
Kol tuv v'hatzlacha. You have to keep talking, you have to keep teaching, and you have to come here and sit in that chair very, very often. You are very special, and you're making an enormous contribution to Jewish life and to the world. And I'm so grateful.
Thanks, Mark.
And I love you, and I'm so glad you're my friend.
It's
Thank
mutual.
you. Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you. The thoughts of Mordechai Kedar, professor of Arabic literature at Bar-Ilan University in Israel, one of the leading world authorities on Arabic culture, thinking, and the media. And again, he brings a perspective that we normally never get to hear. And what you've heard here is an insight into what the real Middle East is about. And you've heard me say this before. I wish there was more humility in the American Jewish community. There are so many of us who think we know what Israel should do. We're not living there. We do not have a clue. There are many American Jews who've never been to Israel, yet they're going to tell Israel how to work out some of the most complicated problems the world has ever seen, and that the world is seeing now in a broader and broader context. And that's the insight that you get from Mordechai Kedar. As